Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the session for Smart PV webinar series. Today's topic is on about the installation and commissioning of our the largest inverter of 185 KTL. My name is Mohammed Hassan. I'm working as a service manager for Smart PV department for Huawei UK. I have done electrical engineering and then masters in sustainable energies from University of Southampton. I am member of Energy Institute and working in the solar field since 2010 in different sectors in Middle East and in Europe. Uh, I would like you guys to join our community website, which is community.solar.huawei.com. These websites provide you much information regarding our new products, their user manuals, their frequently asked questions. There is also information available for the installers, for the suppliers, for like marketing tools, and also there are rewards available, which is for the training and purchasing of the Fusion Solar product. So I will strongly recommend you guys to join our community, which is community.solar.huawei.com. Coming back to today's our topic is about the installation and commissioning of SUN2000 KTL H1 inverters. I have divided this presentation in five different parts. In the first part, I will briefly explain about the product portfolio, which we have for the Fusion Solar products. Then in second parts, we will go through the training for the installation things for the SUN2000-185 KTL inverters. Then in the third part, I will explain the procedure for powering on and commissioning of 185 KTL inverter. In the fourth one, we will see some good practice that I will show you some pictures that how we install that inverters and what are the problems if you are not installing the inverters correctly, not following our recommendations for the installation. And in the fifth part, I will show some pictures regarding the common causes for ISO faults for the products. Coming back to the first slide, as Huawei is the leading string inverters solution provider, we have three types of products available in our range. The first one we call it a utility scale. The second one is the commercial one, and the third one is the residential products. In the utility scales, we have 185 KTL inverters, 105 KTL inverters. Then for the specific markets, we are also providing the transformer solution in 6 MVA and 3 MVA. You can also see that we have a product, Smart Logger 3000B, which is used to control or communicate with the multiple inverters across the utility scale projects. Smart Logger 3000B has the capability to communicate with the 180 inverters at a time, so that you can send the command to 118 inverters at the same time, and you can play with these 118 inverters in one click. Then we have Saku box with the PIDs installed there, and also we are providing the management system, which is Fusion Solar management system. For the commercial side, commercial and industrial side, we have products starting from 12 to 20 KTL inverters. Then we also provide optimizers, 33 KTL A inverters, 36 KTL, 60 KTL M0s, 100 KTL M1 inverter. And also for the communication side, you can find a Smart Dongle 4G, Smart Logger 3000A, and on the monitoring side, on the management side, you will find monitoring portal, Fusion Solar Cloud, and APPs. On the residential side, you can see we have a product starting from 2 to 5 KTL. Again, we provide optimizers, safety boxes, smart PV sensors, and then the product for the bigger residential areas is from 3 to 10 KTL, and then you can find also the smart dongle to communicate with these type of inverters. Coming back to our main topic, which is SUN2000-185 KTL installation. On the left side, you can see the appearance of that 185 KTL H1 inverter. This inverter's the maximum input current for this inverter is 26 amps, and the maximum short circuit current for per MPPT is increased to 40 amp. The number of inputs is coming with 18 inputs and 9 MPPT trackers. Also, you can see that this inverter, the older generation of inverters, the old inverters are having the AC side or the AC compartments onto the left side, but there is no AC compartment onto the left side. We have moved the AC compartment to the right side of that inverter. Why we moved it? Because this inverter is totally completely sealed, so you cannot go to you cannot see any DC components inside in for that part. But for the older inverters, there was you are able to see some DC components, or sometimes products the customers can see the DC parts, and they are playing or they are damaging that part of that inverter as well. So that's why this inverter is totally sealed, and you cannot see any DC side from inside of that the AC compartment of this inverter. The important thing, the old inverters are coming with the M funnel connectors, but this 185 KTL is coming with the MC4 Stubly connectors. So this is another difference between the old SUN2000 KTL series inverters and with this 185 KTL H1 inverters. That this inverter is coming particularly with the MC4 Stubly DC connectors. Appearance, 3 DC switches you can see at the bottom of the screen, and all these 3 DC switches are controlling 3 MPPTs for the inverter. So in total there are 9 MPPTs, and 3 MPPTs are controlled by the 3 DC switches. On the right side, you can see in the yellow part, this is we call it as the host panel, which is the customers are not allowed to open this host panel. This is also the DC compartment where you connect the DC strings coming from the solar panels, and onto that right side you find there is a in the red mark area, this is we call the maintenance compartment, which is also called as the AC side of that inverter, where you will install the AC cables and you will generate power from there. Space required. This is very important for 185 KTL. This is the high power inverter that you need to follow the instructions provided by us, that these inverters should have approximately minimum 600 mm distance from the other inverters, so that the heat will be dissipated from that inverter. It's high power inverters, which generate more heat. So you need to be aware that you need to use the recommended heights or space available on 4 sides of this inverter, so that the heat totally dissipate from that inverter. If there is any other inverter installed, or if there is a less area available or less space available from the other inverter, then perhaps the heat will not be totally dissipated from these inverters, and then you will perhaps start facing some problems as well. Mounting of that inverter, it needs to be mounted straight onto the mounting frame, or if you are using the rooftops, or where you are laying down the inverter onto that floor, you need to make sure that the inverter should be installed at 15 degree from the plane, so that there will be no problems for the heat dissipating from out of the inverter. In the other picture, you can see that we don't recommend to install in different scenarios or different shapes this 185 KTL. Even we don't recommend to install any of Huawei SUN 2000 inverter series in different shapes onto the wall, or so that it can the heat will be not dissipated totally out from the inverters, and it will start creating problems for the installers. In the right side, you can see that this is the installation that the customer has used, followed our recommendations. They have provided the 600 square distance from the bottom, from the ground, and they have provided 200 from the top of the mounting frame from the solar panels, so that the heat will be dissipated from outside of this inverter. 185 KTL comes with 9 MPPTs and 18 inputs. All 3 MPPTs are controlled by the 3 different switches. As you can see in the picture, that the MPPT 1, MPPT 2, MPPT 3 is controlled by the DC switches 1. Then MPPT 4, 5, and 6 is controlled by the DC switch 2. MPPT 7, 8, and 9 is controlled by the DC switch 3. It's safer to work onto the if you needs to work on the any strings, you just close the DC switch related to that MPPT, and you can work safely on that particular part of that inverter. But I always recommend to disconnect all the DC switches before working onto any input of that inverter, so that due to the health and safety issues. And but if you want to work on any DC switch, any part of that inverter, you can disconnect the DC switch. You can switch off the DC switch, and you can work safely on that part of that inverter. But my recommendations, our recommendation is that when you are disconnecting any strings from that inverter, or you are plugging any strings, always make sure the inverter is totally isolated from the DC side and from the AC side, so that you can work safely onto that inverter. Also, another important thing that is this inverter comes with the 18 input, and if you are planning to install less input strings for that inverter, then we will recommend you to connect the DC strings in the format, so that it will be balanced for all the DC switches. Like I have mentioned here, that if you want to connect less strings, that it should be connected into 1, 4, and 7. Means one string in the 1 MPPT, the second string should be in the MPPT 4, the third string should be in the MPPT 7, and like that, then you will increase the MPPTs, the connection into the MPPTs. So it's always recommendable to use the strings into 147, 258, and 369 if you are planning to use any less strings to connect to that inverter. Installation tools required. What kind of tools you need to use for the connection of the DC connectors? The first thing, as most of you guys knows, that our inverters comes with the M-funnel DC connectors. Previously, all the Huawei series is coming with the M-funnel connectors, but for this, the new 185 KTL-H1 inverter is coming with the MC4 connectors. So you need to purchase the Stably MC4 crimping tool. Make sure you use MC4 crimping tool is coming in different dias, so you need to make sure that you use the correct product code, because for 185 KTL the connectors which we use are compatible only with the product code which is mentioned here, 32602 2210. If you use use if you don't use the dia, then there will be a problem with the crimping of the pins, and which can cause you problems during the later when the inverter was running, when the inverter will be running at the maximum output. So make sure you use the correct die, which is the product code for the die is 326020, which is available with Stubli, and you need to crimp that connectors, crimp the pins with the correct die with the MC4 crimping tool. Also, you need to use the wrench tool, which is also available with Stubli. The product code I have mentioned here, which is 326024. You will use the wrench tool to tighten the nuts of the DC connectors. If there is any space or any threads on the DC connectors will be left, then in future perhaps you will find some problems with the ISO faults, and you can lose the production of that inverter. The third tool you need to use is the DC voltage measurement tool. Make sure you use the multimeter, which must have at least 1500 volts, and you need to check the polarities of the DC strings before connecting the DC connectors to the DC strings, because customers don't care about the polarities, and when they connect the DC cables to the input of that inverter, it damage the inputs, and if this is caused, if it's damage the input of that inverter, we are not replacing replacing that kind of inverters, because this is the installation problem. So customer needs to focus on the polarities as well. Recently, a couple of I believe last week, I received a request from a customer that they didn't done the DC polarity test, and they connected the strings to that inverter, and when they switch on that inverter, the DC connectors burnt out. So always I always recommend the customers to use to do the polarity test before installing or before crimping the DC connectors, to protect and to make sure that everything is okay when you turn on the inverters for the production. Also, many customers ask us these crimping tools and wrench tool, we are not providing inside that inverter, so you need to purchase this crimping tool, die, and the wrench tool from the local market. We only provide the DC connectors, which comes inside the inverter boxes with the 18 numbers of DC connectors of positive and negative. So only you will find the DC connectors inside that inverters. You need to purchase the crimping tool and the wrench from the local market. DC connectors MC4 EV02. This is this type of DC connectors, we MC4 connectors we are using onto the string side of that inverters. We are providing the correct number of DC connectors inside the inverter box. So you don't need to purchase the DC connector from the local market. So once you open the box, you will find the inverter, you will find the user manual, you will find the documents, and you will find the DC connectors as well inside. So the only thing you need to purchase, I have mentioned before, that you need to purchase the crimping tool with the correct die, and the wrench tool, so that you can tighten these nuts onto the DC connectors tightly, so that there will be no problem for that one. You can also use branch connectors to connect the MC4, which is locally available in the market. And if use the incompatible PV connectors on that inverters, again the DC input side could be get damaged, and in that case, as I mentioned before, we are not replacing the product under warranty. So you need to make sure that when you are using the DC connectors, you use the DC connectors which is provided by inside that inverter. If you lost that connectors, sometime it is also happening that customers are asking us, they are coming to us and saying that they have lost the DC connector, so from where they can purchase it. So I am always providing them the link, or you can contact me, I can provide you the link from where you can purchase the DC connector from the local market. So that's these are very important thing. These are very small steps that you need to be sure that when you are doing the installation, you follow the procedure mentioned to the user manual informed you by the Huawei team, so that you will not face any problems for the in the future with the Huawei products. I have the solar plants connected 4 5 years back in the UK, where there is no problem. The customer always told us that they installed that inverters and then they forget it. They never gave any problem because the customers followed our advices during the installation, and after that there is no problem for them, and they are very happy with the product. So that's why I always focus on the connection things, that this is the small things which the customers neglect during the installation of the site. And then in future, when the inverter was running at the maximum output power, then they start facing the heating issues onto the connectors, and then the melting of the connectors, and there's so many problems are arising only because of not using the correct tools during the installation of that the site. Installation of DC connectors. Yes, as you can see in the picture, that you need to strip off the DC cable from 8 to 10 mm, and you need to test, as I mentioned before, test the polarities first, then strip off the cables, then connect the correct metal pin, positive metal pin and negative metal pin. They are coming inside that inverter box with the positive cable, and the negative metal pin with the negative cable, and crimp that pin properly with the proper crimping tool, so that you will not face any problem in the future. Here in that case, again, you guys need to use the Stubely with the die number 60202210. This is very important, that you need to use the correct die to crimping the pins of the DC connectors. And once you crimp the pins properly, then use the black one, the plastic connectors, and put the pins inside the plastic connectors. When you and also focus onto the noise like click. When you put the DC connectors pin inside the plastic connectors, you will hear a noise like click. So that means the the DC pin is fixed inside the plastic black DC connectors. So if you try to take it out, you cannot take it out, because it will be fixed inside the plastic connector. Also ensure that you have tightened the locking nut with the use of the 2-wrench tools, which is also provided by the Stubely. You need to purchase it from the local market, and always purchase 2 tools, so that you can hold the DC the plastic connectors with one tool, and with the other tool you can revolve, you can tighten the nut. And don't leave any kind of gap or any kind of threads into the plastic connectors. Otherwise, if you leave any gap, then there will be a problem for you guys in future, because of the ISO faults or some other issues, and you can lose the production from that kind of faults. Also, when you connect the DC connectors onto the inverter side, on the bottom of that inverter, you will hear the noise again, click, which means the DC connectors are properly fixed to the DC inputs, input connectors of that inverter. Coming to the AC cables, we recommend the two types of AC cables: copper cables and aluminum one. You can use the copper cable. The selection range for the copper cable is from 50 to 185 square, and for the aluminum one, for the multi-core, it will be 70 to 185 square, and for the single core, it will be 70 to 240 square. The cable outer diameter for the multi-core is recommended from 24 to 66 square, and for the single core, it is 14 to 33 millimeter. And the most important thing you need to know, you need to inform the installers is about the torquing of the AC cables, because these inverters is the high power inverter, high output inverter. So if you don't put the proper torquing onto the AC connectors or DT terminals or OT terminals, then you can face some problems of the heating things, and perhaps this heating can also damage to that inverter. 2 weeks back, no, 3 weeks back, there was a site here in the UK. The customer didn't put the proper torquing or proper the crimping of the AC connector. So there was a problem here, and then we went to that site. We find all the investigated all things, and in the end, we find out that the torque settings were not provided correctly onto that inverters. That's why they are facing the heating issues for that inverter. So always make sure, always advise your installers to provide the proper torque settings, which is recommended into the user manual, so that you can you will not face any kind of problems during the operation of that inverter. Also, here an important thing which needs to be used, that if you are using the aluminum cable, you must use the washer, which is from the copper to aluminum washer inside the OT terminal, so that to protect any kind of problems for the future. So if you don't use, or if you connect the aluminum cable directly to the copper, then you will start facing some metal problems, and metal will start reacting to each other, and in the later run, you will start facing the problems with the AC terminals of the inverters as well. So if you are using the aluminum cable, always use the copper to aluminum adapter washer, so that to provide or to prevent this kind of problems in the future with the output terminal of that inverter. Here, yes, as I explained before, that always focus onto the torque settings of that on the AC terminals. You need, if you are using the multi-core cables, you need to put 26 Newton meter torque onto the L1, L2, and L3, and 15 Newton meter torque onto the PE connection. And if you are using the single core cables, yes, the 26 Newton meter torque will be available onto the AC connectors for that inverter. So always provide the proper torque settings. Any one of you guys go to that site once the installer done the installation, just apply the torque settings onto the AC terminals, and to see that if the installer has provided the correct torque settings as per our recommendation. Otherwise, it can, if there is a less torque there, then it will burn the AC cables very quickly during the production of that inverter. Also, we are providing two types of glands to seal the AC compartments. If you are using the multi-core cable, you need to use the proper gland which is providing inside the AC compartment. So you can take out the rubber tray, and you can fix that cable inside that gland, and then you tighten the AC compartment. also we are providing the gland for the single core cables. So you will take out the rubbers from the three make the space for the three cables, and then you fix that AC the glands AC cable glands to seal the compartment. If you don't seal that compartment correctly, then perhaps the water can go inside, and then they can damage that inverter, and there will be a problem for the production of that one. Here, this is the new communication cable connectors inside that inverter. This is only applicable when you guys are using the RS485 communication cable with these inverters. These inverters are comes for the M-bus communication as well. They are capable of doing the M-bus communication. So, if for the utility sites, for the large commercial industrial sites, customers are using M-bus or PLC communication to communicate with that inverter. This one is only applicable if you are using the RS485 communication protocols or RS485 cables to communicate with different inverters. The first two pins, the output pins, is for the RS485 A in and A out. The second one, which is used for the RS485 B in and out. The 5-6 pins is used for the PE shielding, and the other is used for the remaining 7 and 8 will be used for any kind of slave devices which you will need to connect with the 185 KTL inverters. Again, I am saying that this is only applicable if you are using the RS485 cables to communicate with that inverters. These inverters comes with the PLC or M-bus communication as well, so that for the large utility scale and for the commercial and industrial sites, the customers are using the PLC communication or M-bus communication to communicate with the inverters. Here, the procedure for installing the communication RS485 cable. Always make sure that you take out the locking nut, and there is we are providing the 2-hole or 4-hole rubber inside the inverter box, so that you can use the appropriate hole rubber to seal the communication pins to communication connectors, so that there will be no water or no other insects go inside and they can cause any problem. So always follow the procedures which is provided in the user manual, or you can contact me for following or asking any if you need any support regarding the installation of the equipment onto that site. Powering on and commissioning of SUN2000 185 KTL. Once you install the product, you need to check few things before powering on that inverter, that the AC cables are properly installed, properly torqued, the DC switches are all off, and there is no loose connections on the string side. And if you are not using any kind of if you left any PV input, make sure you put the lock or the provided cap with the PV input onto that one, so to protect it and you from any kind of damage. Also make sure the RS485 or communication cable or communication connectors is properly installed. The RS485 the USB port is also closed, and everything should be properly sealed, and the compartment, AC compartment, is properly locked, so there is no problems. Nothing can go, no insect or nothing can go inside that inverter. Then the second thing is you need to power on the AC switches first, and then you need to power on the DC switches. The correct procedure for turning on the SUN2000 in any inverter is that you need to turn on the AC first, and then you will turn on the DC. Once you turn on the DC, the inverter will starts operating normally, and it will the LEDs lights are starts blinking within a couple of seconds, and then you will be able to do the commissioning of that inverter. If you turn on the DC first, then the inverter will wait for the AC supplies, and there will be no grid will be available. Then it will start the process again and again. So it's always recommendable to use to switch on the AC first and then the DC, so that the inverter will comes into the proper procedure. Also focus onto the indicators, the 4 LED indicators which are in front of that inverters. You can see it here in the center of that inverters, about the status, which is providing you the information about the running status or running condition of that of the inverter. The LEDs, the first one LED is about the DC input. The second LED shows about the AC power available. The third LED is the communication LED, when the inverter is communicating to your monitoring platform, to the smart logger or any monitoring device. The third LED will blink for 1 second, and then it goes off, and then it's blink again for 1 second. The fourth LED is about the alarm LED. If the inverter is in any under alarm condition, then this LED will be starts blinking red. It will be in red in color. And if you are connected your phone or for the local commissioning for that inverter, this the alarm LED will become green, which means the inverter is communicating to your phone and it's ready to accept your instructions. The fifth part is called the host panel, which is also called the DC compartment. You guys are not allowed to open the DC compartments, because if you open the DC compartment, we are not able to provide the warranties, as we are not able to control the environment condition when you open it, because this compartment was sealed under the clean and properly controlled environment to provide the best performance and output for the lifetime of that inverter. The sixth part is called, as mentioned before, is the maintenance compartment or the AC compartment. So you are only allowed to play to install the AC cables or the tracker cables onto the AC compartment. Commissioning procedures is very simple. There is for all of our inverters, the commissioning procedure is the same. There are only 3 steps involved for the commissioning of that inverter. There is no cold commissioning and then hot commissioning procedures for our inverters. We just follow the 3 steps. You connect the SUN2000 app to that inverter, or if you are using the smart loggers for the utility scale, you can do the commissioning from the both equipments. For the commissioning procedure, you just need to select the date and time for that inverter. Then you select the grid code, appropriate grid code. It depends upon to the size of that site. For the UK, we have 4 type G99 grid codes in 4 different types. So it depends upon to the site size or recommended by your DNO. So you need to select the grid code according to them. And the third step is to adjust the communication address or RS485 address so that the inverter will communicate with your communication equipment or Fusion Solar or whatever monitoring platform you are using to communicate with that one. Once the important thing is that once if you are using one inverter, that is not a problem. But for the utility scale, always obtain the barcodes for that inverter, so that you can upload that barcode. You can upload the serial numbers of that inverter as per your inverter name, and also the COM addresses into that smart logger. As I mentioned before, the smart logger is the device which is used to communicate with the multiples of inverters, like the smart logger 3000 can communicate up to 180 devices. So you can control 180 devices on the few clicks or single clicks. If you use the SUN2000 app, you will be only communicating with a single inverter. The screenshot which is mentioned here, it is from the smart loggers. I've taken it from the smart loggers. As you can see onto that right sides, the inverters. These are the inverters which are communicating with the smart loggers after the commissioning of that of the site. Also, coming back to the good practice, this is very important, guys, that you need to see, and you need to follow the recommendations from us. Here, as I mentioned before, the DC locking nuts should be locked properly, because customers, they don't buy the proper wrench tool, and they try to tighten the nuts by their hands, so they will keeping the gap inside. You can see the threads here, which can damage that inverter in future during this production, and you will find some faults like ISO faults, or some things, because of the water can go inside, and then you can lose the production. So it's always we advise to lock the net properly, so there will be no thread available between the locking net onto the connector. So it should be properly sealed, so it can maintain IP66 rating for that inverter. Here you can see that also the torque settings are how much important for all the inverters, not only 185 KTL, for all the inverters. Here on the right side, you can see that there was a not proper torque was provided onto the output terminal of that inverter, and due to the loose connections, heat was generated inside that inverter, and then the AC terminals for that inverter burnt out. So that's why I always recommend on few things: the proper crimping tool, the proper torque settings onto the AC side, so that you can leave that inverter for the lifetime, and no need to do any kind of repairs or anything for that problems during the operation of that inverter. So these things are very important for you for the installation things, that our inverters only failed due to the installation errors. If you don't follow the instructions, then you will face the problems with any inverter type, not only we Huawei, with all the inverter types. Mounting of 185 KTL H1, you can see, yes, space is very, you need to provide the proper space so that the inverter can dissipate the heat during the efficiently, and there will be no loss of production or anything due to the heating issues for that inverter. So it's always recommendable to use follow the instructions mentioned into the user manuals, in the quick guide. If you are not if you are not understanding anything, or anything is difficult for you, or if it's not written clearly, contact Huawei team, so that you can fix that problem, and you will not face any kind of problems after the installation of the products. Some common causes of ISO fault, during the last I have seen many sites where the ISO faults are appearing for that inverter, not on 185 KTL, but for all the other inverters as well. So I would like to show you some pictures that customers, these are the small things which customers are not focusing on that one, and then it starts creating problem, and it will end up in the big loss. So it's always recommendable that whenever you go to that site, you just follow, you just oversee the things onto that site, and if you find something, just fix the problem as soon as possible to avoid any kind of damage in the future. Here, some faults, ISO faults causes, as you can see, these ISO faults are very common in the UK market. These faults are come because due to the installation things, the customers, the installers are not focusing onto the small things. They neglect the small things during the construction of that site, and later it's start damaging the product or start creating problems for the customer. So whenever you go to that site, just overseeing the things that how the things are installed. If you find any problem, just inform the installer and try to fix that problem as soon as possible to avoid any kind of damage or any kind of problems or loss of energy or loss of production in with that inverters. Yeah, this is something which I was to mention for today.